I had to write a non-fiction book because everybody was going to ask me, as they always do, what's the story behind the novel. And in the case of these three women, Margaret Beaufort, the Red Queen, Elizabeth Woodville, the White Queen, and Jacquetta, Duchess of Bedford, the Lady of the Rivers, there simply isn't the material available. So I realized that what I was going to have to do if I was going to write the novel was, in a sense, research a total biography. And then it occurred to me that if I was going to do that, I'd want to publish that. So in a sense, what I'm doing in my novels very often is finding obscure women and recovering their story. And now I'm driven to do that in a non-fiction way as well. Margaret Beaufort is one of those very interesting women whose history isn't much recorded. In fact, a lot that we knew about her turns out to be wrong. And what we have is this quite absurdly saintly portrait of her. So they really emphasize her holiness, they really emphasize the contribution she makes to the church, they really emphasize the schools she founds and the colleges and the universities she founds, and they really deny the fact that she is a key central organizer in a rebellion against the ordained King of England, then Richard III. As it turns out, that rebellion puts her own son on the throne. In the modern day, understanding a woman's ambition might think it was perfectly justifiable, but at the time they would have been rather uncomfortable by the fact that she was treasonous to an ordained King of England. I don't think I could have written a novel about Edward IV's England and about the victory of the Yorks in the Cousins' War without really starting with Elizabeth Woodville. She's the woman that he marries for love. She's this extraordinary character. She's a widow. She's not even the classic young bride. She's a widow when he meets her with two children from a previous marriage. And she is herself an ambitious, determined and very courageous woman. She survives him. She also survives two defeats. She has to hide in sanctuary twice during her life, and at the end of it she comes out and she ends up being grandmother to Henry VIII. So she has a really extraordinary life which has been very much ignored by historians, and so for me as a novelist, as a writer of historical fiction, she's a really wonderful person to write about because she is important, she is significant, and she's very little known. Once I wrote The White Queen and started to discover the character of Elizabeth Woodville's mother, Jacquetta, I knew I'd have to write a novel about her. Why she's been so neglected, I think, is because she isn't a woman who makes any profound change to history. She doesn't run a rebellion, but she is present at some of these key historical events, and she's in on the secrets again and again. So when Henry VI falls asleep and stays asleep for 18 months, and Margaret of Anjou has to run the kingdom without him, Margaret keeps that secret for about 3 months, and Jacquetta would have known that secret. When Margaret conceives a child after 7 years of barren marriage, and I think a lot of people would have been suspicious as to whether that child was legitimately conceived or not by her and the king, Jacquetta would have known the answer to that. And then, of course, when Elizabeth Woodville marries Edward and comes to the throne of England, Jacquetta is then the First Lady of England after the Queen and supports her daughter in good times and bad. When Elizabeth is enjoying the power and the glamour of being the Queen of England, Jacquetta is at her side. But when Edward has to flee in terror of his life and ends up abroad, Elizabeth goes into sanctuary. Her mother goes into sanctuary with her. Jacquetta is there too, and present at the birth of her grandson, who is going to become the missing prince in the Tower. So she's absolutely central to the story of the York ruling house in the years before the Tudors come to England. And indeed, without her, I really doubt that they would have managed as well as they did.